Namaste. Welcome back, beautiful souls. This is part 2 of 50 tarot tips and tricks. And in this video, I will continue to share with you some of my favorite tarot tips. All of this is in an effort to make your reading process easier, to help break things down, to learn a few practices to help connect better with the cards. And so let's get right into this. Tip number 26. And if you're new, welcome. Hello, my name is Sadhana. So this one might sound counterintuitive to some of the things I have said before in the first 25 tips or in other videos. And that is why you might have multiple copies of certain decks. And I do. I have multiple copies of several decks, and this primarily has to do with studying. The deck that's on the table right now is the JOMO Tarot by Eden Gallanter, and I do have a deep dive to this on my channel if you are interested, if you haven't seen the deck before. It is not an easy deck to get to know. Some of the major arcana are renamed, look a lot different. There are stories within some of the suits, and the apparent meaning or interpretation of a lot of the cards is quite different from a Waite-Smith or a Waite-Smith inspired deck. This is a deep and profound journey. It's definitely a deck of inner deep work, shadow work, self-healing. And I'm so glad that I did a deep dive into it, that I still have it in my tarot library. But as part of my own personal study and finding a way to get to know the cards better, I trimmed them because I knew that I wouldn't learn the deck if I didn't. When I decided to do this right away, I went and, the quartz beautiful, I went and ordered another copy of the deck. I actually ordered more than one, and I've gifted this deck to some other people as well too. So that is one of my primary reasons for having a second copy of a deck, and it has to do with my own study process. A deck that I haven't done a deep dive with yet, though I have done several decan walks, is the Tabula Mundi Tarot by M.M. Moline. And this is an absolutely stunning Thoth-inspired deck. Mel's process is, I want to say, primarily greatly motivated by the color scales of the Golden Dawn. Mel knows a lot about color. Now, I believe this deck was originally published as a black and white deck, and then later the colored one came out. This one I purchased quite recently because I knew I was going to do a deep dive with it. And I'm sorry that the black and white deck is a lot smaller because that makes all the little details harder to see, but really grateful that I have it because it will force me to pay attention to some of the details I haven't seen before. I featured this deck in top tarot majors quite a bit and have referred to these cards in many different classes that I've taught, and really appreciate her writing as well too. She's a great writer, teacher. Trimming decks and having smaller copies of decks, it's really fun. These are 2 copies of the Llewellyn Tarot. I've actually edged them in different colors. I had this one for quite some time and decided to trim off the borders. They are enormous. And then, regrettably, I didn't leave on the top border. Yet I'm not sure that I would want it on. These cards are so beautiful with all 4 borders trimmed. And I love the little size. The artwork in this deck is absolutely stunning, particularly the major arcana. The reason that I repurchased the deck was because I hadn't memorized the myth or the character or the setting for the major arcana. And this is something I am fascinated in, and I want to learn these names. I want to get better at referring to the mythology that goes with the major arcana. You'll see it's not on the minors, so there's no great loss. The sun, of course, is Lula Gifts, and who Llewellyn is named after. And I want to say the borders are beautiful. They're gorgeous frames for these cards as well, too. So that's why I have 2 copies of this deck. And I'm going to show you one more because I have an embarrassing number of copies of this deck. I won't show you them all right now. And that is the Wild Unknown Tarot by Kim Krans. When the special edition came out with the colored Justice card, I decided to color my original copy of the deck. This is not a first edition, it's a mass market edition. I was hoping actually that in the special edition there would be other colored cards. If you don't know this deck, there's a lot of black and white cards, and so it's a really great deck to actually add color to and to put some thought into that. This was a very meditative, this is one that I did, a very meditative process. I think some of the more colored cards are at the bottom. I did a mini series called Color with Me and talked and colored and shared some of my thoughts on adding color to this deck. And I think that it's something that I will continue to do is to color this deck. It's the only deck that I've ever added color to. I've never drawn on. This one just has a little bit of blue on robin's egg blue on the snake eggs. And it was really interesting because it wasn't random the way that I added color to these cards. Just some of the cards have a lot of color in them already, and I just put green on the leaves. So it was a fun process, and I really, really enjoyed that. You'll see that I also have a mini and a first edition of this deck as well too. And because I connect so well with this deck, I am a yogi, as is Kim Krans, and her stories resonate with me. I have found a tremendous connection with these cards. Tip number 27 is about perspective. This is the Tildwick Tarot. And I remember when I did the deep dive with this deck, I believe I started with interior landscape versus exterior landscape. And there was something simply about the energy of that inside the house versus outside the house that really, really said something to me. Even within the exterior landscape, there are inner alcoves as opposed to cards where you see beyond the wall, and you have something powerful represented in the distance, or the possibility of something beyond the wall. The ground that you pay attention to, whether it is the foreground, the midground, or the background, is really, really interesting. And there's something about a deck that gives wide perspective that can teach us a lot. This is the Tarot of Japanese Poetry. And this deck has quite a few scenes where you will see a landscape in the distance. You'll see this deck also has interior landscape. And there's something very different about cards where the art is wide view versus a landscape that is a narrow focus. And this is great for studying because here's another deck that does it well. We tend to get stuck on meanings of cards rather than the big picture. This is the Thoth Journey Tarot, and I will list all the decks below. And if I refer to any videos, I'll list those below as well too. This deck has both wide scape as opposed to narrower landscape. And I think some of my favorite cards in this deck are the ones that have a wide landscape. This one's gorgeous, Below the Sea. I teach perspective, not as an art. Look at this. These are really something, these cards. Learning to see through a different lens, learning to see things through a wider perspective is part of our healing journeys. And this is a perfect example, this card. And so I think it's a really good idea in your tarot library, however large it may be, to have decks that both have landscape perspective as well as ones that are close up, because you see different things. And when a deck creator, this is the Morgan Greer Tarot, chooses to zoom in on something, we do get a different idea about the card. And this more contemporary deck, this is the Ehrenberg, does something really powerful in some of these cards. And I haven't studied this deck yet, but I'm really curious about the choice of focus in many of these cards, because it may not be what, had I made a deck like this, what I chose to focus in on. So here in the Three of Wands, we have a viewfinder, a telescope of sorts in the right hand. This is so cool. I really appreciate this. I have worked with Tarot of the Hidden Realm for many years, and it is a deck that gets rather close and personal. Very different from this deck. It has a lot of emotion in it. This is amazing. You know, I often... Oh, actually, this cup has a lot of the symbols that we see in different cups in the Waite-Smith Tarot. So in the Waite-Smith Tarot, you see the money in one cup, the snake in another cup, the skull in another cup. So that's really cool how that's done. And this is unusual because here in the Eight of Cups, we have one cup close up, but we do see a distant, a wide landscape here in this card. So perspective, having decks that zoom in and zoom out, paying attention to cards that zoom in and zoom out. I think that can really help with understanding certain aspects of the tarot. Tip number 28 is to take the tarot apart. And this is something I do in all of my deep dives, and that is to take some time to look at the like numbers. So pulling out all of the minor twos. Here is the 2 of fire, 2 of water, 20, 2-0, awakening, judgment, 2 of air, 2 high priestess, 2 of earth, 1-2, hanged 1-1, justice. And to see if the deck creator has built in connections between the major and minor arcana, or even among the minors themselves. In this particular deck, it is intentional, at least the minors. So the 2s are about pollination, so the sharing of seed and reciprocity. And there is a beautiful stories that connect all of the 2s. And then you can reflect on the major arcana that have a connection to the number 2 to see if there are any symbols carried from the minors to the majors. And this is something that Mel Moline does beautifully in her decks. I was talking about the Tabula Mundi in the first prompt today, and it can really help you to understand the mandala of the tarot if you take time to do this kind of a of a study, and it really has been an invaluable part of my learning of the tarot. Another deck that really helped me build these kind of connections was my deep dive of the Margaret Peterson. And I will never forget how impactful the notion of relationships in all of the twos became when I studied her deck. So yeah, so my advice here is take it apart. As I prepare for the weekend ahead, what is the most important thing to keep in mind? Tarot tip number 29 is to take your reading with you. I know we all, or a lot of us, take photos of our readings so that we can go back and have a look at them. There is something, however, about packing up your reading and having it handy so you can look at it throughout the day. And one of the things that I have learned from this tip is that there is different light in different rooms. If you have a chance to go and sit outside with your cards to try to reflect on them. Because inside, of course, the colors are going to be slightly different, and outside you may see something you didn't see inside. This is Page of Staves and Two of Staves, and I have another page here. And my eyes are focusing on the images that are in the frames or in the mirrors. Almost as if these are, it's kind of like in Harry Potter, like they might disappear at any time and another one may appear, or they might swap places. This is a page, this is a page, this is a two. There's two pages. There's something going on here. And so I love to do this. I love to pack up my cards and reflect on what is going on in a different spot. There's also two turtles up here. Okay, so there's 3 vessels on the top of each of these garden walls. And this is an interior alcove looking at the floor. We have a sun radiating out like a mandala. And when I am drawing cards earlier in the day, I may not have time to do a deep reflection. I may not have time to journal. And sometimes it's really nice to sit and to stare and to path work and look into the cards. And then later in the day, come back and journal. Even now, looking at the cards in the screen, I see a lot of light on this card. And when I'm looking at it straight at the card to my left here, it's much, much darker. So try it. Pack up your reading and take it with you. Tip number 30 is to begin to reflect on the joy of missing out. FOMO is a very real thing, and I did an extended video on this topic some time ago, and again, I'll link it down below for you. I have made many mistakes purchasing decks because of the fear of missing out, because it was a really popular deck and I thought I needed to have it in my collection. And there's a terrible feeling that comes with purchasing a deck, and you open it up and it's like, what did I buy this for? More recently, I have become very particular about what I want in a tarot deck. I seldom will purchase a deck on impulse. This is something that comes with more experience and time and perhaps even regret. So I thought today I would go to Kickstarter and just share with you my process in deciding whether or not I would purchase a deck. So I thought I would take a moment just to scroll through Kickstarter to share with you part of my process in deciding whether or not I would purchase a deck. A new deck needs to bring something to my tarot library that doesn't exist already, or it needs to do something better than a deck that I presently have. I am not a fan of photorealism, so that is something that right away I can cross off. I don't even need to really look at the decks. There are certain artists whose decks I kind of admire but don't have in my collection. Like, it might surprise you that I don't have a Ciro Marchetti deck in my library. Another popular artist that comes to mind is Silicon Way. I don't have one of her decks. Anyway, so here is another Waite Smith inspired deck. Beautiful colors, certainly my color palette. But do I need to bring another Waite Smith inspired deck into my library? I mean, I would have to have a really good look at this. Odds are no. I have a lot of different color variations of the Waite Smith. I mean, it is lovely to have those. I teach a lot with that deck. There was one that caught my eye earlier, and that was the Departures Tarot. This is also very pretty here. The Windy Wilds Tarot, original art. I'm always interested in original art, and I know that Departures Tarot is not original art. It is a curated deck, repurposing the art from another artist. But what caught my eye about this particular deck is the limited color palette. For those of you that followed my Tarot Card of the Year readings, I used a limited color palette deck. Name is eluding me right now. But this is what caught my eye with this deck. I really am intrigued with the simplicity of limited color palettes. So first step here is to kind of look at the background of the creator. Do they know anything about tarot? What do they know about tarot? What is their experience with tarot? And I need to be careful with that as well too, because there are some tarot decks that I do have that were created when the artist was quite young and didn't really have a lot of tarot experience. And I think of the Way Home Tarot. That is one that was created from a very young perspective. So I'm not saying the creator has to have years and years and years of tarot experience, but it certainly does help, especially when you're doing a curated deck to pull all of this together. And so it's not just the color palette that is going to draw in my attention, but I more critically am going to look at the art and see if there is an honoring of tradition. If any of these cards go in a very different direction, would I be able to work with it? So here in the Hermit, we have the Lantern and something very interesting going on in the background here. Justice looks very familiar. Really unusual courting on the Hanged Man. And sometimes the art can capture my attention. This is a really intriguing deck. I also do a lot of work with astrology and tarot and decanic connections. And so for me right now, I want to be able to bring that in some way. And often it may not be intentional from the deck creator, but I will look to see if I could work with that in a group of cards. And so one of the nice things about Kickstarter, especially if the campaign has already been launched, is that often you can have a look at all of the cards, which is quite different from looking on Amazon. You can't see all of the cards. And of course, you can go through other people's walkthroughs on TarotTube to have a really good look at a deck. Some of these walkthroughs are filmed with music, so you're not hearing opinions and responses and descriptions from the content creator. Other times you will get that. I think it's a really good idea to have a close look at a deck before you purchase it. There's one on my table right now, and I want to thank you. One of you asked for an interpretation of 3 cards in a particular deck. And this is a deck I purchased, really interested in the landscape of the artwork. And yet, in going back and having a closer look at the deck, it's not really one that I can work with. There are too many personal interpretations of the cards. And so that is a criteria that has become very important to me. I don't need more tarot decks that are going to fall in the category of oracle decks. So my advice to you is to get really clear on your criteria for buying a deck. Tip number 31 is to clean your cards from time to time. If you have glossy decks, you are going to see oil and fingerprints, regardless of how cautious you are about that. And I do have a microfiber cloth that I keep on my tarot table, always needing to wipe something. And this is one deck, and the Druidcraft Tarot, I tend to be wiping backs of cards all the time. No matter how careful I am, there seems to be fingerprints on these decks. Sometimes I use a little bit of vinegar and water. Sometimes I will use a product such as Windex and wipe down the whole deck. Very few people actually touch my cards. I don't read in a shop anymore. So it's just me touching my cards. But I did this more with the decks that I read with publicly. And I think energetically it's not a bad thing to do. And of course, I also cleanse my decks. Sometimes I will hit my fist, bang my fist on the deck, or smudge them with smoke. Sometimes I use sound for smudging. But cleaning your cards and making them feel fresh from time to time is always a good thing. Tip number 32 is to have a rudimentary awareness of the paths on the tree of life. Even if you are an absolute beginner with the Tree of Life and its connection to the tarot, you can receive some powerful information that will help you to make more sense of a reading. So, for example, knowing that the path that connects the 4s to the 5s is the Strength card can bring tremendous insight. When we leave the energy of the 4s, we leave a sense of safety and security. We leave a foundation, a home. Granted, sometimes that could be a prison. We never want to stay too long in the 4s. And we all know the journey of the 5s is rather difficult. And the path that connects the 4s to the 5s is the journey of strength. And we need that quality, that deep inner fortitude to persevere through the energy of the 5s. The next path from the 5s to the 6s is justice, or this is also known as adjustment or karma. And through navigating the 5s and finding our way to the peace and the harmony of the 6s, we walk this path that helps us to reflect on the continuing journey of what we need to release or perhaps amp up a little bit. This notion of adjustment is really, really powerful. And yes, it can be reflected in legal matters, but more often than not, it is our response to each and every step that we are making throughout our day and our week. So I can't say enough about beginning to take a look at this. This is something that I begin to tap into in my Tarot Foundations 2 course, yet it is of a much deeper level. And part of this is studying the Hebrew letters, among other associations as well. So my point here is that even as I would say just kind of past the beginner level, having a look at this, having a tree of life handy on your tarot table can bring tremendous insight. Tip number 33 is a suggestion for when you really don't know where to go with a card. There's either so much going on or it feels very unfamiliar. So take, for example, this High Priestess card from the Margaret Peterson Tarot. It looks really different. We do have 2 pillars, and yet on these pillars, there is a sword on one and a wand on the other. The cup is here, the pentacle is here. That might sort of seem like a magician card. There's a dark moon here, full moon, and we have a view through to the sea, to the ocean. There's a contrast between the ocean and the flames that are below. The sky is above. There are 3 windows. We see 1 in full, 2 in part. There is a bright light emanating from the body of the High Priestess, and behind the High Priestess there is darkness. And yet we can glimpse a part of that window as well, too, into the sea beyond. The High Priestess is heated by the flames below, and yet this doesn't seem to perturb her in any way. There's something going on also behind the head in this shape here, this eye shape. This process of describing a card can be really helpful. This 2 of coins is unusual in that it has footprints, and I know in the coins in this deck there are footprints in the coins. What do footprints represent? What do they mean to you? I'm also picking up on the sand here and the water. It almost appears as if we're at a beach, and that seems familiar because isn't the 2 of Pentacles at the seaside in the Waite-Smith Tarot? And yet we have this symbology of the Marseille Tarot, more older traditional tarots, the Ouroboros or the Lemniscate. And why are the footprints here? What do footprints represent? There's also something in this footprint. One appears to be red, one is blue. Harmony and balance. And oh, look at what we've got going here. We have this 2 thing going on, right? So High Priestess as a 2, balancing, harmonizing fire and water. So something interesting connecting those cards. I did a deep dive with the Margaret Peterson, and it was so brilliant because if you take your time and you look at the paintings, you will begin to see layers emerge. And I know in the preface of the guidebook, there's some discussion about Margaret wiping off canvases and repainting on the same canvas so that bits of old paintings appeared through the artwork. There's one court card in this deck that I have seen so many things in every time I look at it. And again, if you look at the art in different light, you're going to see different things. And I believe in one of my tarot tips, I talked about looking at your cards from different directions as well too, and that can really help. But the best thing for me has been to begin to verbalize. This also goes with speaking your readings aloud. When you are forced to just start talking, you can, rather than interpreting, just describe what's going on in the card. So what's going on here? There is a bright light, almost like an explosion. And when I look down here, there are two figures embracing. There's some darkness here. It's almost like somebody is, or a dark entity is emerging or merging into, or wanting to come into this relationship here. I love doing this. I love just talking about cards. This one I learned so much because this symbol that is over the, so it's sort of over the solar plexus. It's awfully low though. For me, this is connecting to the womb and the feminine energy. We have a dragon. This is such a great strength card. There's so much to talk about here. We have moon phases in this card as well too. This is the card I was talking about, this Son of Cups. There is somebody swimming in a rather stormy sea. There are masks, almost full armor. There's something lying on the bottom of the sea here. And so this process of describing the art and practicing describing the art can be a way of leading into or out of an interpretation. We need not always interpret the cards. Sometimes describing the cards is enough. Tip number 34 is to not overcomplicate your readings. You may be drawn to a deck such as the Thoth Journey Tarot for its beauty and its art. And your journey of Golden Dawn associations may be very rudimentary. And yet there is a way to work with a deck like this. You know that this is the Eight of Water, the Eight of Cups. It's written on the bottom of the card. You can see that there is a long road to a town in the distance. You can see that there is a stormy sky. There is a large cup in the foreground. And who knows what else you're going to see in these paintings, because these paintings are very layered and beautiful. This idea of describing the card and letting your simple description or focusing on what you see first, to let that be enough is enough. You don't necessarily need to know that the Eight of Water is connected to the astrological sign of Pisces. What the sign of Pisces represents, that Pisces is the final zodiacal sign of the astrological wheel, and that the Eight of Water is a Saturnian decan, that eights are connected to Hod, that eights are balanced by sevens and Netzach. You can go on and on and on. There is a time and a place for deep analysis like this, and yet it is also perfectly okay to get lost in the path of the river and let the metaphor of the river simply tell your story. The deck that I'm sharing with you now is the Mystical Dream Tarot by Janet Piedelato. And this is a deck that I purchased after witnessing somebody write daily about their observations of this deck. And I knew there was something kind of mysterious and wonderful. I already had a dream deck, the Phalarkos Tarot, and yet there was something kind of different about this deck. I was really curious about it. I knew I did not have time to work with it. I knew that it was going to take a lot of energy to begin reading with this deck, and it's still not one that I have studied at all. And I did read through the introduction in the guidebook recently, and there was a piece of advice that felt so enlightening. And that was, when you are bewildered by a tarot deck, to spread all the cards out on the table and to have a good look at them. And you might do this for your daily draw or your weekly draw for weeks and weeks and weeks until you begin to feel more comfortable with the deck. And rather than drawing a card, choose a card that catches your attention and know that that is the energy that you are ready to work with on this day at this time. And so I choose this Two of Pentacles, observing the card and reviewing all that I know about Two of Pentacles, and curious about what is unique and interesting in this deck. When I choose a card, it's like choosing a crystal. You know, there's a pull about it. There's something that wants to be known. And so I'm going to go to the guidebook. At the portal of a new enterprise, there lies the necessity of give and take. With reason and intuition, male and female, maker and receiver, working in harmony. The dream must be grounded with the stability of the needs of the waking reality. One is caught between rising and falling in thoughts of expansion and enterprise. The seeker cannot move into the workshop of the new opportunity unless they have accepted reality and care for the flesh as well as the spirit. A new plan, situation, or relationship has been recently hatched due to the great success already in place. Nevertheless, the plan is not yet firm. The ideas, dreams, and desires are marred by the great burden of caring for what is already in place. Success demands continued attention and support. Growth has its burdens. Overextension has its dangers. It is important to see truth on all sides, keeping the purity and ease of what is, or moving on to expand. Accepting that growth may lead to complexities generated by an uncomfortable giant. One must not favor the lofty dream without accepting the physical necessities which are an essential part of the successful manifestation. Life is a balancing act. There's also something very trusting in this picture. And so this process of choosing a card face up feels just a little less intimidating to me. Tip number 36 is to develop an awareness of the lunar cycle. Are we close to the dark moon, the new moon, the full moon? Is there presently a lunar eclipse? This information can be really helpful in interpreting your reading. I have a lunar journal that I've purchased for years, and I can look at the date. Today is the 30th of January, and I can see that there was a new moon yesterday, so I know that the moon is beginning to wax. If you begin to learn some key words for waxing energy: growing, building, acting, stepping, and on the other side of the cycle, you begin to learn some keywords for the waning energy: diminishing, restoring, resting, turning inward. You can develop a new relationship with any given reading. Now, if I look at the cards that I drew earlier, asking about my weekend ahead, I want to see if these are in alignment with the present lunar energy. So one of the cards was the Two of Wands. Two of Wands is a beginning energy. It's early in the numbers. It's also zodiacally early of energy. And yet it is a wand, and wands are about action. And so I would say that this card is very much in alignment with what is going on in the lunar cycle. As are pages. Pages are early in the journey. I have a page of fire, which is active, and a page of cups, which is receptive. So these feel kind of harmonious. Not all three cards are about building energy, and perhaps that is a symbol of not going too quickly with the waxing energy. And what I have found is that the more familiar I become and the more words, the more vocabulary I build in connection to the phases of the moon, the more I am able to understand supporting or diminishing energy, supporting or challenging energy. Had the cards on the left all been receptive and retreating and less than active, it may have told me that I would need to put in an extra effort in stepping forward over the next few days. And I suppose the big picture of this particular tip is that the more we become aware of the lunar cycle and the more we move in sync with its movement, the easier things become. We don't want to be a fish swimming against the current. It doesn't help. Tip number 37 is really fun. And this is something that I've been playing with in one of my tarot classes. And that is to know your personal decans. Most of us know our sun sign and the major arcana card that is connected to our sun sign. However, you can take that a step further. So my sun, if you look at this chart here, my sun is in Leo in the second decan of Leo, which is connected to the Six of Wands. This card I want to pay attention to more when it comes up in a reading. It has more of a personal nature. My Mercury is in the, so here's Mercury here. My Mercury is in the first decan of Virgo. Interestingly, very close to my sun. And this, in this decan of Virgo, we have the Eight of Pentacles, which is a favorite card of mine. It's very near and dear. And when I put these two together, it really began to build a new relationship with the card. And you can see on this chart, I have put all of my planets and the cards that are connected to the decan that planet is in my natal chart. And I've just found this a really handy little thing to have as a reminder, because sometimes when you're doing personal readings, I think it's harder to read for yourself. And so the more tools I have to interpret my own readings, the more connections that I can build with my own readings, the easier this whole process becomes. Tip number 38 is to review old readings, to go back through your journals, to go back through your photographs, and to have a look at where you were 6 months ago, a year ago, what happened on your last birthday reading. It's really important to record dates, to know where your tarot journals are. I have found I learned so much from reviewing old readings. These bundles of cards are on the table. I have 12 of these bundles. They are from an astrological reading that I did in the summer. And I decided to keep these bundles together because, like I said in a previous tip, there is a lot to be learned from actually looking at the cards rather than looking at photographs. And for my Aquarius sign, these are the 5 cards that are part of my Aquarius journey. And so I want to have, early in the sign, I want to have a look at the story of these cards and the connection to what I'm moving through at this time, what I am learning. I also am really intrigued with and I don't think I noticed this when I did the reading in the summer, the 9-9. So I'm going to reflect on this in terms of the Hermit year as well, and also bring in the energy of my own card of the year. On the surface, this looks like a really difficult group of cards for this sign, and yet there's also something quite illuminating here. Had I not saved these little bundles of cards, I would simply be looking at an old photograph, and this doesn't allow me to move cards around and to put them into different configurations. So, I mean, we all don't have an abundance of decks to do something like this, but I have found this really kind of fun. And so this was the card for Capricorn season, what happened over Christmas and New Year, and looking back at all that we went through as a family and the things that have gone here. It's really confirming the power of the tarot and how my story, how my healing, how my personal work in the cards. Tip number 39 is to be sure to choose a favorite and a least favorite card when you are exploring a new deck. This is the Ehrenberg Tarot, and like I said before, I haven't worked with this deck. It's purchased it in the summer and have only leafed through cards, haven't done any readings with it. I'm really intrigued with it, and I've spoken to the Strength card before. I really like this card. I feel a deep connection. Absolutely love this World card. Takes me back, reminds me of a few different things in my life. And so the process of going through a deck isn't just about choosing your favorite cards or your favorite card, but also picking a least favorite card. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from our least favorite card. I think it's one of our greatest teachers. And there's something, these 2 cards, I don't like them, the King of Pentacles and the Wheel of Fortune. I hate the idea of gambling and a gambling wheel for the Wheel of Fortune, because I've learned so much about this card, and it's more earth-centric meaning. Even though we have the alchemical symbols here, we have powerful symbols on this card, and yet they are laid upon what looks like a gambling wheel. And so it upsets me. And I think there is something to reflect on there. Just like the King of Pentacles, when I think of the King of Pentacles in the Slow Tarot as well, it's one of my least favorite cards. When the King of Pentacles is only about the money, money, money. There's so much more to this court. I think it's sad. And so I don't want to just do that. I want to go, okay, so why is this so irksome? What does it touch in me? What does it bring up in me? And I would pare this down to 1 or maybe 2 least favorite cards, journal about it, and then put that away until much later when you are more comfortable with the deck, and then go back to that least favorite card and see if that has changed, if you've grown with that card, or you still, feel that way about the card. And I think this is point for not hastily getting rid of a deck that doesn't fit with you. I've always given decks a great benefit of the doubt, even when I sense that they are not going to be part of my tarot journey for a long time. And I know that one of these decks was the Blood Moon Tarot. I purchased it out of pressure because so many people were saying what a great deck this was. And I just thought I must be missing something. And so I did purchase it, and I did choose a favorite and a least favorite card. The Fool card was my favorite. I don't remember my least favorite. I put the mini tableaus together. I tried to make sense of it, and it just didn't fit with who I am as a tarot reader, and so passed it on quite quickly. However, before I did pass it on, I did give it my best effort. And if you have watched my channel for some time, you'll know I did a deep dive with the Hush Tarot. There were so many least favorite cards, and I found the whole deck rather irksome. However, through the process of the deep dive, I came up and developed a new relationship with the deck. I don't have it anymore, but I learned something about the tarot, and I learned something from that deck. So sometimes the deck or the card that doesn't appeal can be a great teacher. Tip number 40, I think I've touched on this, but I'm not sure I've said this explicitly, and that is to give yourself permission to choose a deck just because you connect with the artwork. I think this is why I kept the Cheminette Tarot around for so long, why it's still here. I love to look at the art. The court cards are just beautiful. The expression in the faces, the way the hair is drawn, the watercolor, the cups cards. There's so much in the art, and I find it touching and inspiring. And sometimes I just like to look at these cards for the art. And I use the word beauty. I did a video discussing beauty and beauty's connection to spirit and to deeper understanding and to tapping into something that maybe is a little difficult to understand. I have a similar relationship with Le Tarot Oreilles Étranges. I find this art absolutely captivating, and it may be the energy of the art. It's hard to describe. It's so, to me, is so beautiful. It's like energy and art come together to give a very powerful connection to spirit. And I know there are several decks in my tarot library where it's the energy and the beauty that bring out the most powerful of readings. This deck has never left my stand beside me since I got it. It is just a way into spirit. And at the same time, I would call this a moon deck, a lunar deck. But it is also very much a deck of beauty and connection to something greater. My favorite card in this deck is the Lover's card, and it's not one of the dark cards. It's one of the bright green cards. Single figure, here it is, in a field of wildflowers. It's like the cards make me exhale, and I love that. Believe it or not, Dreams of Gaia is new to my tarot library. I purchased this because of a conversation that I had with a subscriber, back and forth about this deck. And I have had Raven Fallon's Oracle for a long time and love that deck. And I work with that deck and Tarot of the Hidden Realm. And I never purchased this deck because I know it has a different system and that it would take some time to connect with. So what am I going to do when I get a deck that has renamed court cards, different kind of energy? Well, my best advice here is to work with what you know. And I know a lot about the tarot. I know a lot about the element of fire. I know a lot about the number 9, the energy of healing. This is a very intriguing 9 of Wands. And so if I were to shuffle and read with this and to dive right into it, I would start with what I know, because the honest truth is I don't have time right now to learn and to understand the expanded or different system that this deck is. I bought it because I knew I would connect with it. I have a deep connection with energy, and I really do love her artwork. And any deck that has a dragon is a great deck in my opinion. That is okay. It really, really is. And that has also been a part of building my relationship with the Wildwood Tarot. Though I have studied it and I know its system inside out and backwards, I also bring to it what I know from other systems and other decks. And sometimes it fits so very, very beautifully. Like, for example, in this card, this is the 5 of Cups. 5 of Cups is a Scorpio card. I see stars here, but we're also below the water. And I know when I connect to the cards of Scorpio, I'm thinking about deep dives underwater, exploring the depths of our challenges. And I love how these fish are colored red. This is a Marshall decan, I believe. At least Scorpio is a sign of Mars. And I'm going to speak to what I know and what I love about the tarot. Maybe I'm going to get some stuff wrong according to the guidebook. And I can come back later and learn more about that. I know a lot about the chakras. I have a course called Tarot Through the Chakras, and maybe this is a deck that I would be able to speak to the chakras in a lot of cards. This is my decan, 6 of Fire. Wow, really interesting. And I think this is great permission for beginner readers as well too, that it is perfectly okay to work with a deck that looks a little bit differently with the meanings that you have already come to learn. You don't have to go to the guidebook and read the description for the Queen of Earth and change everything you know about the tarot. I think this is about expanding our interpretations, not changing things completely. Right? This is the Sage. This is the 7 Chariot energy. This looks a little bit like the Mary L. Chariot, doesn't it? With the dogs. We have the wisdom on one side. We have the wand on the other. The wolf. That's really cool. So yeah, this tip is about working with what you know. Tip 42, honestly, I think is how I read. I always listen to the cards. I don't let the cards control me. I am in charge of the reading, or I should say, I am guided by spirit in the reading. So the question I was thinking about as I was holding these cards was, what underlies my relationship with G? And oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, we do. There is some connection here. However, this particular exercise is to trust the random interpretations that come through. This couple looks really young. Like it looks like a memory of a childhood. I wonder if he reminds me of somebody from my childhood. There's my Mercury card. Okay. And, honestly, this is part of what is going on in my relationship. This is me walking away, choosing to do what I want to do, loving what I do and doing what I love, letting go of security. What is the random thing that I am noticing here? Perhaps I should have chosen a deck that I haven't seen so many times. There's something about the way that not only is she dumping the contents of the cup, but she's dumping the cup. She's dropping the cup. The cup will break. There is a letting go. It's really interesting having this as a forward-facing card. There's security in both of these cards. There is all of these pentacles that are being clung to, the home in the background. She's walking away from the home. And that's something I've never thought about, going back to this reflection of a childhood connection, in that he reminds me of something from my childhood. That's what underlies it. I've never seen that in the Two of Cups before. The beauty of reading tarot, and especially if you do enough readings, is that you will start to see more and more things in the same old cards. The stories expand and expand, and yes, you will have repeating themes for certain cards, but on any given day, you're going to notice some bizarre thing in a familiar card and say to yourself, I've never seen that before. What? Why is that coming out of that card today? Or you might feel as if in a set of cards like this, there's a particular connection that pops through in each of the cards. There's a line that is drawn, or there's a symbol that is telling a story. It is so important to trust the random interpretations that come through. Tip number 43 is to know your decks. And there are several reasons for this. One is that there may be a particular occasion where a certain deck just feels like the right one to take with you or to pull out and read with. But more importantly is when you are listening to a story or you're listening to another person try to formulate a question. This is most beneficial for people who read for other people, and you might find a way to connect this if you're only reading for yourself. But I can't tell you the number of times people start to tell me a story or they start to describe their problem. And I say, can you just wait a minute here, just to hold that thought? And then I either go over to my little stand over here, or I go to my tarot library and I pull out a deck, leaf through the deck, and I go, I have the perfect card for you. Exactly what you are describing, I can see in this card. Have a look at this card. Is this how you're feeling? Is this what you saw? It's really great when people can connect with the pictures in the cards. And you might then use that deck for your reading and use that particular card as your topic card or your significator. And so if you work with your decks and you really get to know your decks, you have so much more flexibility in how you use your cards. Tip number 44 is to have one or more decks sorted and ready to go. This deck I always reset. So this deck is organized. The majors are on top, and then I have the wands, the cups, the swords, and then the pentacles. I don't put them in order. It's not necessary because I can very quickly go through the 14 wands cards and find the wand card that I am looking for. Again, sometimes this is because I refer to this deck to compare and contrast with another deck. I might use it for a teaching moment or something that arises in a reading. I might need to pull it out for a color contrast. So if this deck is sorted and I'm working with another Waite-Smith deck that's almost the similar artwork, I can go and grab this one, which is the Centennial Waite-Smith, which is the one I use the most, and go, oh yeah, the robe of the Queen of Cups is completely different. And then compare and contrast the robes. And I find that having a sorted deck is extremely useful. All right, let's go back to the Dreams of Gaia for tip number 45, which is to expand your senses in your readings. So usually we talk about what we see in a deck, but sometimes it can be really useful to talk about what you smell or what you hear. In this particular deck, I can hear the crackling in the cauldron. I can feel the cold air on my back. And I can smell I don't know if I can smell frankincense or maybe vetiver, something really woody. There's something very rich and oily in the air. I can feel the coolness of the satin on my knee. And this is part, I suppose, of my process in describing cards. So when you describe a card, usually it's what you see. But I challenge you to go beyond what you see and ask what you feel. This particular card, I'm noticing the boots. What do you feel on the earth beneath your feet? Is the earth warm? Is it bumpy? What is compelling you to raise your left hand up and move your hood back? What does the air feel like? Can you taste anything in the air or smell anything in the air? In this 14th card, what do you feel in your belly? What's going on right now? If you close your eyes and listen to your gut, what do you feel? Can you smell the roses that are surrounding the dais upon which you sit? Why do we have to limit our readings to sight? Why can't we expand and include a variety of sensations? Tip number 46 is to trust your mistakes. When you incorrectly speak to a card, so you look at a card, you see a single wand, and you start talking about the Page of Wands and the way the Page of Wands is holding the wand. And this actually happened with this deck when I was going through it in a recent video. And then it occurred to me after a few minutes that this wasn't the Page of Wands. This was indeed the Nine of Wands. And so why was I drawn to the energy of the Page of Wands and the single wand? Well, this is something that's happened to me many, many times at the beginning of my journey and more recently, all the way through, as a matter of fact. I have more than once in certain decks mistaken the Seven of Wands and the Seven of Swords. There have been other cards that I start speaking to a particular card, and then I realize, oh my goodness, that's not this card. What am I talking about? Do I start backtracking, or do I keep just going forward with what I'm saying? That is what I do. I just keep on going forward, because there is a reason for everything that you say and everything that comes out of your mouth. And I think this is one of the important reasons, whether you are reading for other people or not, is to speak your readings aloud, to just let it roll. This looks like a headache. Also looks like a dream. Interesting. I could see getting mixed up with a Seven of Cups or something like that with this card. This is about embracing your mistakes. And know that they are not necessarily mistakes. They are words that need to come out of your mouth. And to trust in the process is part of becoming a more confident reader. Number 47 is a rather loaded topic, knowing how and when to end a reading. And I can think of situations where I have ended a reading 5 minutes into the reading, even though the person is paid for 45 minutes or an hour. I can think of situations where I am at the hour 15 minute, hour 30 minute point, and the person has paid for an hour. So a whole range of situations begin to happen. Or when I was reading at the store and I knew there was another client waiting, or I'm reading at home and I know I have somebody else waiting on another Zoom appointment, and I know how long it takes me to switch between Zoom calls. I have to be really mindful of my time. And so whether you need to cut a reading short because you know it's not going anywhere, or whether you need to wind up a reading because you are going over time, or because enough information has already been shared. You can't possibly digest anything else. And this might be another reason to cut a reading short. It's that because the question has been answered and there really isn't anything more to say. And this is about you getting more confident in yourself as a reader. So, if I know the reading isn't going anywhere, and I'm thinking of a situation where the person on the other side of the table was humming and hawing, and I could tell they weren't connecting with anything I was saying, they didn't like my approach, I simply said to them that I'm not feeling the cards today. I'm happy to give you a full refund. Let's wind this up. And that's what we did. They were not hearing anything I was saying, and it was just a really difficult and awkward situation. And that has happened on more than one occasion, not very often. And so to have the confidence just to end things is really an important skill to learn. If you are having a great discussion and a great reading, and it's time to wind it up, one of the things I might do is to have an oracle deck at hand and just start shuffling the cards. It's almost like your shuffling another deck is interrupting what's going on, especially if they're talking. And so you can say something to the effect of, let's wind this up with one more card. and call it a day. There's different things you can do to just bring it to a close, but a lot of this is about you and your confidence. And I have to say that it is important to respect the querent's time as well. I'm thinking of a situation where I was at a party, and it was so interesting. I had 4 couples, and I did, or maybe 3 couples, and I did a reading for the husband and the wife of each couple. They were all sitting around. We were outside. It was summer. They were drinking wine or other beverages. I really had to read the energy of each querent to know exactly how much I could say and how long to go on for. Because this was a party, and it was important just to deliver the perfect amount of information. I had based the fee on 15 minutes per person, but I didn't, for some people I went over 15 minutes and other people I went under 15 minutes because I was reading the room. And so this is a really important skill to learn, depending, of course, on your reading situation. Tip number 48 is to get really good at both creating and prompting questions. Very rarely will I let a querent get away with just a general please kind of response. I find that the more energy that gets put into the question, the better the reading is going to be. And so I take time to ask questions, prompt the querent if they are not able to come up with a question themselves. And because I have a lot of experience with this, I just have a conversation and develop this. But I think if you are a beginner reader, it might be a good idea to have a list of questions on your table, or even to have a set of cards, like index cards, that the querent could look through and select a question. You may have a sheet like this and have it in a sleeve or have it laminated so that the querent could look through it and pick a question. If you're not able to help the querent come to a question themselves. And with these questions, many of them could be adapted for a relationship reading, a career reading, a personal wellness reading, because the nature of questions, it's always about you. It's always about your journey and your healing process and your better understanding of yourself. The more that you can redirect the question back to the querent, the better you're going to serve them as well too. So I think it's of great assistance to have a tool like this handy if this is not your forte. Tip number 49 is to value your work. Many of you will read only for yourself or for friends or for family. The temptation or the common pattern may be to just do it for free. But you have invested a lot of time and energy into studying and purchasing decks and books and watching Tarot Tube and getting more comfortable with this process. It's really important that the people who receive the benefit of your work give something in exchange. So even if you are reading for your daughter, or you are reading for somebody that is close to you, think about what you might ask for in exchange. It could simply be the token of a dollar coin, something as simple as that. I often trade with my daughter. She does acupuncture and massage, and so we trade, and it's it's unspoken, but we give freely of our services to each other. And I go back to my days when I was working in a metaphysical store. Often new staff members would come in and they want to know how you read so they can sell your readings. They want to know what your reading style is, and so they want to experience a reading from you. And so the assumption is that they will get a reading for free because they work in the store. Well, fortunately, in the store that I worked in, the owner of the store paid for those readings. But I don't think that is quite right, because even though it is it's not a test so much as it is a testing of the water, you are giving something to the person who is receiving the reading. And so I think it's really important to ask for something in exchange. To also, if people are uncomfortable with that, to learn to find a way to share that concept with those that are receiving a reading. And when people ask for a reading, or they ask if you could pull a card, find a way, a gentle way to say you would appreciate a token of exchange for this service. Tip number 50 is really kind of fun. It's about building playlists for your significator or for your card of the year. I had at one time some rather extensive playlists for a number of cards, and I don't know what happened to that Spotify account. And I've recently started to rebuild some playlists for some significant cards in my life. It's really been a lot of fun to go through some songs and to review lyrics and really start to listen, maybe from a different perspective, being a little bit older. And of course, some favorite songs will be in these playlists. It's just something I really love to do. So if you've never done it and you love music, I strongly suggest giving this a try. And if you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I really look forward to your comments below. Have a lovely rest of your day. Namaste.